رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي. In this video, inshallah, I will be presenting the book notes from the book of Sayyid Maulana Maududi, Islamic Education System, and in Urdu, it is Islami Nizam-e Talim. So, of course, this book was written several years ago, decades ago, after Pakistan was made. However, I still believe that the contents of this book, the problems and the solutions presented in this book, are still relevant today. Of course, you can disagree and make certain changes according to what resources we have available today, but a lot of things that he points out, I think, are still available today, and a lot of the information in this book can still help us revive our education system in Pakistan, especially in Pakistan, and all over the Muslim world as well today. So, of course, he discusses the problems in this education system and then points out certain solutions that we can that he has suggested. So, starting off the book, the notes I have taken from it. First of all, he starts off by saying that in Pakistan we have two types of education systems. First is the system of madrasas, or known as religious schools, so-called known as religious schools, where they supposedly are supposed to produce religious scholars. And then the second type of education that we have in Pakistan is the university graduates which come from the universities, completing the bachelors and the masters and PhDs. And the first group, madrasa, they're supposed to take care of our religious side. Let me complete the statement. And the university graduates are supposed to run the rest of the country. Now, this is a big problem when you say there is something religious and then there is the rest of the country. So what we actually need, as I've stated in number 3, is a single system that removes this distinction of the Deen and Dunya, the religion and this world. Because this is a problem. Religion is not separate from the rest of the world. The religion is what guides us through this world. So this is a very big problem in our education system. We need a single education system, not two separate education systems. So then he goes on to point out the problems in each of these systems, the madrasas and the universities, and then goes on to give the solution. So the first education system that we have in Pakistan is the old education system, which we think is the old education system of producing religious scholars, the religious education system. But in reality, and this was a revelation to me as well when I read this book, that this was actually not the old religious education system that we had. Rather, it was the old civil service education, perhaps like the modern CSS that we have, used to produce people to run the country at the time before the British came to the Indian subcontinent. And so this was used by people who wanted to work for the civil service to run the governments before the British came to the Indian subcontinent. So this would be like, I don't know, 2.5 centuries ago. And in that time, you needed a bit of religious knowledge and the fiqh and the jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence, because that was what the country was run by. So that's why you needed the Islamic education. But the real education system that still continues today, as known as the religious education in Pakistan, is actually the civil service education of the past. So it wasn't really supposed to produce religious scholars. It's a big problem, right? What we did was, when the British came, many people thought that this education system that we have of the madrasas was supposed, we need to protect it. At that time when the British came, we need to protect it. So they kept it as it is, and as time went on, it became it started becoming more and more useless by time, because people were getting used to the new education that the Britishers introduced, and we needed a system that actually was updated by time. So it started the only real purpose even today of such people who come out of these madrasas is only to run the masajids, and they just teach children how to read the Quran, and basically, in order to keep themselves relevant in society, they keep coming up with these religious issues that don't really matter to us. And as time goes on, really this education system is not actually honoring Islam, rather it's somehow humiliating Islams and Muslims at the end of the day, because it's not updating itself with time. And then this education system, as number 3 says, doesn't develop skills, rather neither religious nor worldly, because religiously it didn't update itself to actually produce the real scholars, the real uh, people who would work, the muhaddithin, the mufassirin, etc. Rather, and neither did it work on itself on the modern worldly education. So now let's go on to look at the problems of the current education system with which the British brought here, which is the O levels, A levels, matriculations, and these kind of systems, right? The FSCs. So this new education system. Now, before we go into this new education system, we must know what the purpose of an education system is. Any education system that is introduced in any society, it is meant to produce a certain kind of mindset in the individuals who come out of that system, out of the educational system, right? So the purpose of an education system is to build a nation in a particular mindset, that you need these kinds of people coming out of the system. This is the kind of mindset they should have. This is the kind of skills they should have, right? So the purpose of British here when they came to India, of course, it wasn't to defend Islam or to protect the legacy of Islam and the systems of that Islam has introduced. What they wanted, like, think about this. What they wanted here was, they wanted people in the Indian subcontinent, the local people, to learn their language, their systems, and then to basically deceive their own people and support this invading power. So they wanted people with a slave mindset, a slavery mindset, right? But back in England, they wanted people who were running a free country, not slaves, right? So they had a different system for that country, and for this is when they came to the Indian subcontinent, they wanted a mindset of people who were slaves, who supported a foreign invader, the British, and basically run the country for them and basically give advantage to those invaders, right? So of course this was a big problem, because they wanted to produce a mindset of mercenaries, who basically you pay them off and they work for you, right? So of course this godless education, point number 3, and by the way, when it says godless education, it says the Britishers, because the way modern science developed in Europe, it was because it was in such a way that it had detached itself from the religious circles, from the church, and even if those people who developed this science, they were not completely disbelievers in God, at least they didn't feel that they needed God in their day-to-day lives. So the British brought that same godless education here and introduced it, and the disadvantage of that was, after they sought this education, till today we've kept those systems without changing them. People who come out of this system, you don't have to tell them there is no God, you don't need God. Automatically they don't feel the need of God. You know why? Just take an example. When you taught up things like gravity, we're taught in those books, the way this godless education was developed was, we were taught that gravity exists, the earth pulls us, but we're not taught that it is God who put that gravity, the value of gravity here, the value of gravity on Mars and Jupiter and Sun. Everyone has a different value. We're not taught that God programmed them. Rather, we just say it exists, rather than saying God created it. Or we say the water cycle works, the rain goes up, condenses, forms clouds, comes down. But the Quran teaches us that Allah causes the rain to fall down. Allah has kept those temperatures, those freezing, boiling, condensing, evaporating temperatures. He has kept those values. Any other system in this world, if you developed a software program, the way it runs, we always know there's a programmer behind it, right? Likewise, when you design a building, we always know that there's somebody who decided how many windows and doors it's going to have. When it came to this science, development of science, they just removed God from that, and we introduced the same system, the Britishers, here in the Indian subcontinent. And that caused, and still causes, because we still have the same system, we need to actually tell the next generation that it's not the systems running on their own, the nature around us. All these values in nature have been designed by God. And number 4 is very important, that by not changing education, filthy trades develop in an enslaved nation. That's because the kind of mindset they needed back in their own countries, in Europe and America, was to develop people who ran a free country. But here they wanted slaves. So here they did not want people to have that mindset in which, of course, we copied them without actually using our own senses that we need a free country, without changing our education system. They wanted to create slaves here. So they didn't want values like honesty, truthfulness, and sacrificing for a greater purpose, avoiding fraud, theft, all these bad traits. Uh, they introduced them here because they wanted people who sold their country in the hands of their masters, right? So these traits are not developed in an independent, in a free country, but they're developed in countries like which are basically colonized by foreign powers. So now he says we need a revolutionary step in Pakistan. Of course, he's talking several years ago, but I think it's still applicable today. We need one system, of course, not two, to remove this even subconscious mindset that penetrates into the society, which basically introduces the idea that religion is something different from our day-to-day lives. And number two, the purpose of this education is nothing but to develop a free, of course Pakistan is a free nation, a nation that preserves its culture, and our culture really is Islam, right? To preserve the Islamic system, and that automatically, of course, the purpose is to bring the welfare in all spheres of life, but that welfare automatically comes through the Islamic system. And number three is that separation of religion and worldly life is very important, that this separation be removed. Because if you want to create Islamic historians, Islamic economists, Islamic politicians, Islamic doctors, engineers, all of them should know that this is certain. If one becomes an Islamic historian, he should know what the true history of Islam is, so that people cannot defame Islam. If he's an Islamic economist, he must be able to develop a country, or the Islamic country's economy, on Islamic values. If he's an Islamic politician, he must be able to develop the country's political system on basing it on the Islamic system. If he's an Islamic doctor, engineer, all the systems should develop. The people who come out of the system should be able to develop the systems Islamically. And then number four is the building of character and conduct. That's very important, because that system, in whichever field of life you are, if you don't have a good character, which we sometimes call soft skills, but it's a very important soft skill, be your character and conduct. I mean, it's such an important skill. You can call it communication skills and all the other skills that come with this. Basically, our character and the way we deal with others. A person without a strong character in any field of life, he's just gonna ruin himself and the people around him as well, right? So finally, he starts off by saying, let me give you a practical roadmap. And he goes through these 4 levels of education: primary, secondary, higher education. And primary, and then secondary education being the high school education up until the high school, and then higher education, the university education, bachelor's, and specialized is, of course, when you have PhD, masters, etc. So he goes on one by one, saying, first of all, in the primary, you should continue the existing content, but you shouldn't be like blind followers. Keep updating it as time goes by, as new experiments come in, and keep the Islamic touch with it as well. Not just like I told you, don't say gravity exists. You should teach the children God put this value of gravity on Earth, on Mars, right? Just like a programmer programs a program. But every subject should be as it is. However, every subject, 4 things should be there. And of course, we need such teachers, such capable teachers as well. Number 1, the concept of God, like meaning instead of saying A for apple, say A for Allah, right? Because you need to incorporate from the very young age, because that's a very malleable age. The mind is still developing. You should put these concepts in the mind of the children, that this world that you're living in, God is the sole king, the sole authority. You are his slave. You are his basically his caliph on earth. You have a mission to obey God. He's the sole power, right? These are the kind of concepts you should inculcate from the very beginning in primary schools. Then this part B, which is moral good and evil, from the very beginning, children should be made to love good and hate evil. How? Those teachers practically should show them, and even through the way they teach them, meaning they should introduce good concepts like truthfulness, honesty, being on time, valuing time, being punctual, sacrificing for the people, avoiding all bad things. The teacher should introduce such concepts by showing that these are concepts you should love. They should introduce them as things that you should be attracted to, and introducing bad concepts such as lying, cheating, committing fraud, committing evil in society, shamelessness. These things should be introduced as something evil and some things you want to be stay away from. These are filthy things, so that from the beginning a child starts hating these things. And then also you should inculcate the Islamic beliefs, what we believe in, in God, in the day of after, the messengerhood, and the afterlife. All these things with a bit of evidence, as much as the children can understand till the age of 10. And number D is the jurisprudential issues, fiqh issues, with evidence again, as much as you can, up until the level of a 10-year-old child. He must know the basics of Islamic jurisprudence, how to take self of himself in terms of cleanliness, wudu, prayer, fasting, all the basic problems in practical Islamic life, right? Then going on to secondary education, up until the end of high school, before a university, we should keep the same content, keeping updating it, and again teaching it from an Islamic point of view, right? Updating the books as well. The second thing is Arabic should necessarily be introduced as a necessary subject, because of course the Quran is in Arabic, and they should be able to, by the end of the high school, able to read and understand basic Arabic texts. They should be taught Quran at least 2 parts, or 2 juz at least, with complete in-depth translation, etc. And of course the aqaid, the beliefs, this time should come with deeper proofs, and because actually answering the questions why God exists, their philosophical angles, and why do we need a creator. For example, we need a creator. Why is there a need of a single creator, for example? Because you see, if there were two equal creators with two equal powers, there would be chaos. Nothing would exist, right? Things like this, and their effects of such beliefs in our daily lives. And the morals and the ethics, of course, introducing morals and ethics, this time through examples, showing examples from history, how good people made those sacrifices, how their truthfulness changed the course of history, how their honesty, how their bravery changed the course of history, showing examples from the past, and then showing examples from the past of how evil people were destroyed and how they destroyed the nations. And then jurisprudential issues, like which we call here in Urdu Shari Masail, should go much more in depth, this time covering all the practical problems in Islamic daily life, from marriage, domestic problems, social problems, economic problems, political problems, how to deal with all these issues, up until whatever you need in practical life, right? So that we don't have these modern problems where we have highly so-called educated engineers, doctors, and they don't even know the basic principles of their daily life, and then they are stuck in these problems. Oh, I divorced her, I did that, I don't know what to do. They should know all these problems. And finally, they should know, and they should have at least a bird's eye view of the entire history of Islam. And they should know the history of Islam doesn't start from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it's from the beginning of time, beginning of man, and up even after Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam till today. They should know a rough view of what different of all the basic timelines in the Islamic history. And then finally, prayer, salah, and recognizing obligations as obligations. This is very important. It's part of every human psychological wiring. A teacher tells them, let's take the example of salah, prayer I've put here, but it applies to everything in life. A teacher tells his students, prayer is an obligation. You must pray 5 times a day. Yet that teacher doesn't pray. It's an example. Parents, the same way, they tell their children to pray, but they themselves don't pray. This applies to anything. You tell people to do something, but you don't do it, right? What that does is, it doesn't tell, if you tell your students prayer is an obligation, that's not what they register psychologically. What they register psychologically is, do you pray? But if you don't, what happens psychologically? Okay, so that's the rule in life. Things that are obligations, it's okay if you don't do them. And then they take this psychological training that they took from the teachers or parents, and then they destroy their entire nation, the next generation. Oh, then obligations are not really meant to be they're not really meant to be done. They're not really meant to be taken seriously. So they'll go in any field of their life, political, economical, engineering, medicine, whatever work they do, whatever responsibilities they're given, they're like, oh, it's an obligation, or we're not supposed to be taking obligations seriously. They destroy the entire generation. That's a big thing. If you pray, every school, high school, every child must be obliged to pray during the praying times. Every teacher must pray with them. And anyone who does not pray, they should look at him, or anybody with bad characteristics, lying, cheating, committing fraud. They should all be looking at them with basically looking at them as evil people. Really, they should. Just like when somebody commits a fraud, a dishonesty in a group of honest people, people look at him as something that's really bad, like a foul smell coming from him, right? Likewise, good things should be introduced in such a way that youngsters and the students come out of the system believing that this is it. If you don't do it, it's a big problem. It's an emergency. And by the way, I didn't mention the biggest thing that should be inculcated in the minds of the students is the fear of God. Everywhere, whatever you do, because the real thing that protects you from evil is the fear of God, right? Whatever you do, you should know taqwa, that God is watching me, right? Then higher education, again, there are two curriculums. One is a special curriculum for every field that you're studying, but the general curriculum should be introduced into every field of education, every specialization, right? Quran in Arabic, they should know, so that they don't pray and in the prayer in Arabic, they don't know what they're reciting. Even reading the Quran, they don't know what they're reading. They should know Quran. They should be reading the Quran in Arabic. There should be at least one collection of a hadith book that they should be reading in Arabic, so that their Arabic becomes fluent as well. And then they should have a general introduction to Islamic systems of life, economical, political, social, domestic, right? All these educations should be going along the specialization. And then even in the specializations, every field should be studied from both worldly perspective and an Islamic perspective, right? If you're becoming a historian, perspective from Islam, what Islam tells us about history, how nations rise and fall, and general history as well. And then if you're becoming, let's say, a philosopher, the philosophy generally which has been taught in Western philosophy, let's say, and then the Islamic philosophy, the philosophy of the Quran, how nations rise and fall, how the attitude of man in good and bad times, how a man should think, how human beings should think, all of the philosophies that are given in the Quran. And then finally, specialization, which is this last and final education, which is going in depth into a specific field. You have all the other fields that you should go into, like engineering, medicine, whatever you go into, you can go into the specializations. However, there should be a very specific field known as Islamic education, which produces real top-notch scholars, real people who can, when they study the Quran, they can become the mufassir of the Quran. When they study hadith, they become the muhaddithin. When they study jurisprudence, they become the faqih. Real education, in which you will have in-depth Arabic, in-depth Quran, in-depth study of hadith, in-depth study of fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, beliefs, aqaid, and comparative religion, right? And the one who gets this degree, even though they are in a specialization, but the one who gets this degree, he should have equal opportunities of employment in the society, just like any other field, right? Finally, in order to apply all these measures, we need people on the seats of the policy making, educational policy making. We need such people over there who actually love Islam. They know Islam. They know what Islam wants, and they have a desire that Islamic education should come in. Right? Without that, you can just keep fighting with the authorities. Nothing substantial is going to happen. Secondly, the teachers that you're going to appoint, you need teachers which are competent, right? They know their subject, but equally important is their character and their religion, right? If they don't have character, they say something, do something else. What are you teaching the children? You're teaching children, do something else, say something else, right? And finally, every other field, you can have a bad person, bad engineer. He's going to make a building, is going to fall, kill some people. Bad doctor is going to kill somebody. But a bad teacher destroys an entire generation of students, right? And maybe many generations to come. So teachers' effect is quite deep, right? Finally, the environment. We need to change the environment. We need to remove from our schools, our educational institutions, the fact that we're still the slaves of the West, right? Remove that mental slavery and that inferiority complex. And the most important thing is, from bottom to top, remove this mixed education, right? We don't need mixed gender education. You cannot have young men and women sitting together, right? And then we expect out of these educational systems, like they were already intermingling with each other, and then we hope that one day they'll come out to be the real God conscious people. That's not going to happen, okay? You're going to plant an eggplant seed and expect a mango tree to come out of it, right? And secondly, right from the beginning, you should even introduce proper dress codes for women as well. That's something I'll add, right? Because what you train them, even though they're little girls, but whatever you train them to wear, they become comfortable wearing that, right? Finally, education for women should be the same. All the same measures that I've introduced from primary school all the way to specialized education should be for women as well. But knowing that women are the queens of the household, Islam gives them a special status, and according to that, they train the next generation to become the leaders of the world, right? They build a home, and that's high. She's not built for running industries, right? She's built for running the household, right? That's how she should be trained. The difference between number 3, the West, and honoring women is that the West doesn't honor the woman until she becomes a pseudo man, a fake man, an artificial man. She's not given her money, her protection, her household, unless and until she joins the workforce. But Islam honors a woman without making her an artificial man. In the house, the Islam honors her by crowning her as the queen of the house, right? Without actually kicking her out of the house and expecting her to make money. Finally, from all levels, from top to bottom, from primary to specialized, there is no room, absolutely no room for co-education. Men and women should be separated, right? And finally, the script. This was a problem, I think, in the past, not today, where there was like there's an argument about at that time. Perhaps Bangladesh and Pakistan were one. Like, we need a common script, or why not introduce the Roman script, the English script? Of course, this is a problem of that time. So he said this is a big problem. Because if you turn the Urdu script, which is very close to Arabic script, we'll use all our Urdu literature will be lost. We'll have pace of intellectual progress would go down, because we'll have to rewrite everything in the new Roman script, and the connection with other nations would be lost, because Islamic entire world runs on the Arabic script. And finally, Muslims need the Arabic script anyways to study the Quran. So why it's much more better to stay on the Urdu script, right? However, we in the modern times, of course, we have this WhatsApp and all the on social media. We do have this mix of writing different languages in English in the Roman script. However, I think the same social media is also writing it in Urdu. So I think the most important thing is, I think as Pakistanis, our three languages which are essential are English for, of course, international as an international language, then Urdu, our local language, and finally Arabic, the most important language, the language of the Quran. Finally, the last topic is the status of English, which says that we do need to learn English to stay up with the modern sciences and the modern development of education. However, the medium of instruction should be the national language, Urdu, right? So that's all I have from this book. However, what we should do, like as Muslims, of course, we should try to develop the system. Today we have the facility of the internet, and this is, of course, myself. I'm making an attempt to revive education. So today we have the internet. We can use all the resources we have to introduce these ideas and let people know of what the truth is, what the reality is, and expose the world using the modern tools that we have. I think a revolution for me was the fact that the system of the madrasas that we have today was actually not there to produce real scholars who are real muhaddiseen, mufassirin, the real mujtahideen, right? It was the system of the olden civil service. We really need to revive that, right? To produce real scholars, right? Not just discuss these small issues of fiqh, but the real Islamic systems, right? Educational system, economical system, political systems, social systems, right? Those are the real things, not just debate on the small fiqhi issues, right? We need real scholars, right? And then it was a revelation to me that even the modern systems that we are running, A levels, O levels, we're not updating them, and we're not teaching them from the point of view of God. These are all godless educations, telling us that the rain comes down instead of saying Allah sends down the rain, right? Because we know programs are programmed by programmers, buildings are built by designers. So why don't we teach the same thing in the same language, right? It's God who put the values of gravity. It's God who designed the universe. He put the shape of the earth as it is. He gave the value of the temperature at which the water evaporates, at the pressure at which it evaporates. All these values have been put by God. We have to teach it in such a way, right? There's a designer who designed all the parameters of the universe. So in any case, may Allah revive our education system. Let's take help of all the resources we have, including the internet. And most importantly, we need to inculcate in the minds and hearts of our children the fear of God, right? So with that, may God accept this little effort I've made and revive the Muslim Ummah. And I think it's already on the process of revival. With that, I'll end this video. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.